Hey, Iron Man, we are in Mark chapter 13 today. Glad you're with us. Hopefully you've been reading along, and this is a very interesting chapter. It's different from anything else that we've gone over so far in our study. But the question I asked the men this week was, what would you do if you knew that Jesus was returning tonight? Like if he was coming back at midnight tonight, what would you be doing differently? And it was funny to hear these guys act, or answer this and say, well, there's no way to polish up my act like before he gets here. God knows what I've been up to all along. Some people said, yeah, I would definitely call and share the gospel with people friends that I have that are lost and don't know Jesus. And, so it was interesting, but what would you do if you knew you had 5 hours, or if you knew you had a month left, or if you knew that you had 6 months left? How would that change your life? How would it change your perspective on living? And as we look at this passage, what are the sequence of events? How is Jesus going to return? And he touches on a little bit of this throughout this section. So we're gonna be looking at that. But the emphasis from Jesus in this section is more about how are we going to be living our final days. Not so much him giving clues of when he's coming back and that sort of thing, but what should our focus be on in the last days? So the question is, what are the last days? People for generations, for hundreds of years, even a couple of thousand years, have thought Jesus' return is imminent, that it's coming, and we're in the last days. There's some speculation and some confusion on when Jesus says, this generation will see it. And the word generation, the term isn't exactly how we use the word generation. It's more of this people, that Jesus has to, all of these things have to happen. And he says that such things must happen when the end is coming. Verse 7, he says, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nations will rise against nation and kingdoms against kingdoms. There's going to be earthquakes in various places and famines. A lot of things have to happen, and a lot of things have already happened on this list. So we really don't know when he's coming. We don't know if it's tonight or 10 years from now or 1,000 years from now. So there's 3 lessons I want you to take from this today. The first one is Jesus' commands about these last days. The first one is don't be deceived. The second one is take heed to yourself, or pay attention or give consideration to. So let's just say take heed. And the third one is be alert. So those are kind of the 3 things we're going to talk about. But as we look at the beginning of this passage in Mark 13, we see the disciples kind of doing this weird like small talk thing with Jesus. We don't really see this before. But one of them says, do you see all these great buildings? As they're walking through, look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. And Jesus, rather than saying, yeah, you're right, wow, how cool, what a engineering marvel, he almost pulls a Debbie Downer and says, well, do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left on top of another, and every one will be thrown down. Okay, these were massive stones. I read it when I was researching this. Some of these were 12 feet by 18 feet by 42 feet, weighing hundreds of tons. So back then, that was an engineering marvel, like I said. I mean, how would they even move those things or do those things? So Jesus is unimpressed because he knows what's coming. In 70 AD, sure enough, the Romans came in and flattened it. Not one stone was left on top of the other. It later got rebuilt, but the original temple that Jesus is talking about didn't make it. His prediction came true. His prophecy was right on. So, how are we deceived? The first one is do not be deceived. How do we get deceived? We get deceived by following, even Christians do, following charismatic teachers, people that we really like, pastors that maybe have started off on the right path that seem normal, and they eventually, kind of get off path. I watched a show about this cult in Nashville, Tennessee, and it started off seemingly pretty normal, and by the end you're looking at this going, what is wrong with these people? How could they fall for all of this stuff? I mean, just with common sense you'd think, no, I would never do that. But thousands of people every day are following leaders that have led them astray. They've deceived them. So not only are non-believers being, led astray, but believers are as well. And we will know that if it is Jesus or not, if people will say, okay, yeah, he's here. I followed this David Koresh guy, in Waco, Texas. He says he's the Messiah. We've had lots of people that have said they're the Messiah. But here's how you know that it's not true. And you'll know exactly if it's true if Jesus comes back, is the method of his return. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7 says, "Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those that pierced him." Okay, so everybody will see him coming. It doesn't say if you're paying attention to the cloud, you'll see him. It says every single person will see him. So don't be fooled if somebody comes along at some point and says they're Messiah, because you would have seen them coming. Okay, number 2, we have to depend on his word. We have to love it. We have to read it, absorb it, live it, so that when we hear false teaching, within our spirit we know, that's not right. Okay, this person, he's gotten off course here. So this is something we have to depend on, his word, through daily Bible reading. And if the teaching is not biblical, we have to reject it. And if you're going to a church that's not teaching from the Bible, and they're teaching stuff that's contrary to what you know is correct, maybe you need to think about going somewhere else. In verse 23, he says, "Take heed, I have told you everything in advance." So it's not going to feel like it's some kind of mistake when something's happening. This is what it means to pay attention to. So if you have persecution, if you have people that are trying to lead you astray, if you're being if you're being punished for being a Christian, or you're being told you can't say these things or whatever, these are going to happen to us as followers of Christ. In verse 8, he says that there's going to be wars, earthquakes, famines, and these are just the beginning. These are birth pains, he describes it as. Now, I've never had any children. I've never delivered children. I have 3 children. I've been to 3 deliveries, 4 if you count my own, but I don't remember much about that one. So I've been to 3 deliveries. One, I specifically remember my wife being in a lot of pain, and it was hard to be there and holding her hand and squeezing her hand and her squeezing my hand, and it was tough. But afterwards, it's the joy that makes it all worthwhile. It's hard going through that. It's hard watching your wife go through that, but there's joy in the end, and that's why he describes this as birth pains. We're going to have to go through some hard times, but on the other side, there's a reward for us. Verse 9 and 10 says, "You must be on your guard, or you'll be handed over to the local councils and flogged in synagogues. On account of me, you're going to stand before kings and governors, and you're going to witness to them. But the gospel has to be preached to all nations before he comes." Well, that used to feel like a monumental task, didn't it? Man, Jesus is never going to come. How are all the nations going to hear about Jesus? Well, the internet has changed everything. People in the most remote parts of the world have cell phone coverage, and they have internet everywhere. So I think that has been a big change as far as speeding up the time where Jesus will come. Now, we know that through this persecution, we look at Stephen. He was stoned for his faith. Saul was persecuting the Christians in Jerusalem, and they all scattered. And you see God use that scattering of Christians during this post-resurrection time of Jesus to spread the word, to spread the gospel. So God took something that was horrible. The persecution of these people was terrible. But as they went and as they left the danger, they were telling people about Jesus and about the good news. So Jesus tells us, expect trials ahead of time, and don't be surprised if they come, because they're coming. And Jesus emphasizes that in verse 30, the gospel is going to be opposed until the very end. He says, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all of these things take place." There's going to be opposition to the gospel up until the very end. Okay, the last one, number 3, is be alert. Be alert. It appears 3 times in the last 6 verses of this section. And he's telling us, we don't know when he's coming. Okay, you have to pay attention. Pay attention to the signs. Pay attention to the wars. Pay attention to all this stuff. Don't be lazy. Don't be lackadaisical. Don't assume, in other words, we have all the time in the world before Jesus comes back. Now, if you take a look at the end of the chapter, verse 38 or 35, he says, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether it's in evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or it dawns. But if he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping." Okay, what Jesus is telling us, he's warning us in these last days, don't just simply watch. Don't look for the skies. He says he's coming in the skies. Everybody's going to see him. Don't sit there and watch for him the whole time. Okay, what are we supposed to be doing diligently while he's gone? Okay, what are we supposed to be protecting? If we're protecting the house, if we're the servants watching the master's house, okay, we're taking care of it. We're being good stewards with what he's given us. We're protecting those that we love. How do we protect those that we love now? Okay, we raise them the right way. We teach them the gospel. We teach them about Jesus. We teach them about his teachings. And not just our family, but those who are around us. We need to be living in such a way, we're such an example to them, that we're being fruitful, with our time while Jesus is waiting to return. So be alert is the final one. I just want to take a quick look about those three commands again. First one, while we're waiting in the last days, and we are in the last days. The last days is vague. It's anywhere between when Jesus was resurrected to when he comes again. We saw that Peter thought that he was living in a time where Jesus might come back. When the Holy Spirit came on them at Pentecost, it was predicted in Joel that, that this was the end of times. So don't be deceived about Jesus. Don't be led astray. Don't fall for false teachings, and hold fast to the truth that you've learned while reading the Bible. Now, the second one is, take heed, be careful, pay attention. Prepare for persecution that could be coming your way and opposition, but don't worry, he says, have confidence that Jesus is in control and that he's predicted it, that it's going to happen. The last one is be alert. There are wars going on, even right now. Of course, there's been wars going on for 2,000 years or more, ever since the beginning of time almost. So there are wars going on. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to what's going on in the news. Work diligently and do the things you can do. Don't just sit around and watch the news and say, hey, this is it. Okay, we're getting ready. Jesus could be coming soon. There's certain things that we need to be doing as we wait for his return. We need to watch out for, like I said, for those that we love. We need to be protecting ourselves from every kind of evil attack as we wait for the return of the Master, as we wait for the return of Jesus. We don't know when it's going to be, guys. We don't know if it's going to be in 1,000 years. We don't know if we're going to meet Jesus in 5 minutes. I asked these guys earlier in our group today, what would you rather know? Would you rather know the day that you're going to die, or would you rather know the day that Jesus is going to come back? And almost everybody said they'd rather know the date when Jesus is going to come back. But unfortunately, that's just kind of a fun thing to talk about. We don't know. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know when Jesus is going to come back. I do know that we're not going to have any advance warning. Okay, when it comes, it comes. We have to be ready. So the question is, are you ready? Are you ready for a conversation with God soon? Maybe sooner than later. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next week, Mark chapter 14.